It is 5:31. I am going to go ahead and call today's meeting to order. The first order of business is board reorganization. This is our first meeting since the elections. So I would like to start off with nominations for SU board chair.
I nominate Mary Niles.
Are there any other
Want a
nominations?
second for that?
We don't need to.
Okay.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor of Mary Niles as board chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Oh, 3 meetings and I did it each time. Roll call. Okay, Polly,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
and Mary.
Aye, thank you.
And you now have Rick on the call.
Okay, and Rick, not sure when you jumped on. With nomination.
Aye.
Okay,
Should we tell him he's chair?
yeah. You just voted for Mary Niles as board chair. I swore I was going to get it right and remember the roll call vote this time, and I blew it. Good thing I don't have to do it again for a year, and hopefully we'll be in person by then.
Oh,
So, Mary,
goodness.
I'm happy to turn this meeting over to you.
Okay, thank you all. I appreciate it. So next order of business then is the vice chair. Jean Marie, I know you are currently the vice chair. How are you feeling about that with some of the changes on the horizon for you?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Emily Norris for the position.
Great, okay. So
And
we
I-
have
And I talked to her in advance, so this shouldn't be too much of a shock.
super,
Still
okay.
in shock a little bit, but it's okay.
Either that or she's got a good poker face.
Both.
Okay, so that's great, Emily. The nomination for Emily, and any other nominations people would like to consider? Okay, so by roll then, Rick,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Looks a little frozen.
oh, okay. Well, she made the nomination, so I think we know she's in
Aye.
favor of it. Polly,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. Great. So clerk, and that is you, right, Polly?
It is.
Are you delighted to maintain that position?
Delighted.
Okay. So I will nominate Polly for clerk. By roll, Rick,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
okay. Polly,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. Okay, so next on the agenda, the regular board meeting schedule, time and day.
So you don't really have a consistent pattern. You have historically had it be I think I'm going to get this wrong now, the week after the ER meeting, if I'm remembering correctly. So kind of the third month. Do I have that right, Morgan? Third week, sorry, of the month. And we've tried to do it on Tuesdays. You don't have a meeting for the SU board every month. You historically don't have one over the summer. You have them from September through January. January is a if you need it month. And then you typically have one in April. And then if anything comes up in between where you need to fill in any of those other months with a meeting, we've done that through special meeting.
So And Lynn, do you feel like there may be a need to have them over the course of the summer with all the complexities around kind of COVID and moving toward another school year?
There may be this summer. I think, it would be safe to maybe schedule a July meeting. And if we're not in a place where we need it, you could always cancel the meeting.
Of course.
So I think
I'll actually need you for a May meeting for the food service management contract decision, which I'll talk about later.
Okay. So days of the week, I mean, right, we have always done them on a Monday. Does that still work for folks, the Monday at 6:30?
So can I beg for Wednesdays?
Yeah, I don't think have we done them on Mondays? No, we haven't done them on Mondays.
Tuesdays usually, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, Tuesdays, my bad, of course.
So I'm
Tuesdays. I
hearing-
think, Rick, Wednesdays are tricky because that's our NMV day.
So I think what we've tried to do, Mary, is stagger them a little differently so that we don't have those double weeks like we did
Yeah.
previously. So we've done the first week of the month has been NMV, the second week of the month has been the Enosburg Richford Board, and the third week
Yeah.
has kind of turned into the SU. So
Okay,
that, I think that was Kevin Blaney's idea, if I remember right, to try to get away from those back-to-back nights.
yeah, definitely. I'm
Yes, it
fine
was
with
my idea.
a Wednesday.
I definitely like the third Wednesday has been working out pretty good for me.
In
Okay.
here.
Works for me.
Nice. How about you, Jean Marie?
It will take our silence as acceptance.
That's dangerous. Rick.
Can you see or hear me yet?
Oh,
I saw the
now we
thumbs
can
up.
hear you.
I saw it too.
Does the time still work, the 5:30 time?
I'd prefer 6 if we were 5:30 is a little early. Work, kid wise, dinner wise. How do people feel about 6 as a compromise?
6 is definitely easier for the little kid dinner perspective
Yeah.
for sure.
And-
6
and
works.
6 works. Okay, so we're gonna say the third Wednesday of the month at 6 o'clock. Do we need to do a motion on that or just consensus is good?
I don't think you need a motion.
Okay, super. So the meeting posting locations, they seem to be working fine unless someone has other suggestions or thoughts about whether those aren't working in your respective communities. All good on that? Okay. And then this piece around Robert's rules, Lynn, just that we're going to continue to follow the small board. Do we need a motion on that?
No, I think just have the conversation of, do you want to stick with what you currently have, which is the small board's rules, or if you want to switch back to Robert's rules?
I think the small board's rules have been working well. How do other people feel about it? I'm seeing mostly thumbs up and nodding heads, so I think we're good with that, Lynn.
Okay.
So the consent agenda, we've got the previous minute, no specific reports, and then the various policies. Any discussion around those? So if no discussion, then we just need a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I will make the motion.
Oh, Rick beat me.
Okay, great. So by roll, Polly,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. Okay. So Morgan, can you share with me what our visitor scene is looking like right now?
So at the moment, there's only one visitor in addition to Northwest Access, and that's Casey Blaney.
Okay,
And
so,
there's nobody in the waiting room at the moment.
okay. So originally, when I thought we were going to have someone from the Richford Select Board joining us, I was going to talk about reorganizing the flow of the meeting, but since she's not here, that doesn't seem needed or necessary. So
Right.
then we'll just kind of, we'll just proceed as outlined in our original agenda. And our visitor, would she like to be recognized and speak?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so so then Morgan, we're at the financial and business report. We're ready for you.
Great. So as you all know, I sent the audit out to you by email at the beginning of March. We do want to get a motion on the books to accept the FY20 FNESU audit, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions you have at first. And as I tipped in the email, if you feel there's a reason, we can certainly arrange to have the auditors join a future board meeting. If you did that, I would probably wait until Enosburg Richford and NMV make motions on their audit and do some sort of joint meeting if that worked for everybody. So does anybody have any questions? It was again a clean audit. We are getting lapped this year, which is a little frustrating. We're already starting this current year's audits and we don't have the NMV one finalized yet, but that way we don't fall out of practice, I guess.
Keeps you on your toes.
Exactly.
You need a
So
motion?
if there are no questions, I would need a motion to accept the FY20 FNESU audit.
I can make that motion.
Great. Okay, by roll, Rick,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Polly,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
Thank you. I have not sent out a financial update for February, and when I looked today, I realized that in 2 days I can send it out through March, so I will get that out to you next week. Again, at the SU level, there are no concerns about where the budget is ending up. Two non-action items that I have. I just wanted to update you on the RFP process, both for the food service management company as well as for the central office space lease. And they're a little bit different in the way that they work. I did advertise the food service management committee RFP. And again, this would be to provide food service for Sheldon Elementary only. We are offering potential bidders a virtual walkthrough because of COVID, and we would be doing that next week for anyone who is interested. The bids are due back to us on May 3rd. Assuming that we get multiple proposals in, I will be pulling together a committee to evaluate those proposals. And because of the way this process works, that committee will bring forward one recommendation to the SU board. They will choose among the proposals we get and give you the most responsive. You as a board will either be able to select that food service management committee and we would drop a contract with them, or you can choose to run the Sheldon program as a self-operated program similar to the other schools. You don't get to go back and say that you really wanted the second most responsive bidder or the third most responsive bidder. It's similar to construction projects that way. Dawn and the in-house food service doesn't have to submit a proposal to you, but we are going to try to come up with some financial comparables help you make that decision. We will still go through the evaluation process, even if we only get one bidder. But again, the one bidder would be the one that we bring forward to you. But at least we'll kind of go through the evaluation so you know what we looked at. The committee is going to be made up of Dawn, Christy Martin, principal of Sheldon, Miranda Johnson, who's a NMV board member representing Sheldon, but is not on the SU board. I will sit in on that. And then we have one committee member that I'm going to ask to be in on that. And I haven't connected with her yet, so I don't want to share her name, but we'll have those 5 people reviewing the proposals. So again, we will accept bids up until May 3rd and anticipate a mid-May board meeting for you all to act for a July 1 start. So I'll pause there and ask if there are any questions on that process.
Morgan, can you just clarify? I'm not sure. I'm having a little bit of Wi-Fi lag. Who so far do you know is interested in submitting a bid?
We don't know anybody so far. We sent it out to a list of 10 companies that we know operate within the state of Vermont. That's a list that the AOE maintains. I have a confirmation from the Abbey, the current provider, that they did get the application, so I assume that they're going to come through with a proposal. There's one other outfit that has recently bid in Franklin County, and so I think optimistically we hope to get those too. I have also advertising in a newspaper, but I don't think there are any companies out there that we in the AOE don't know about.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure. Are there any other questions on that? Okay. In terms of central office space, I wanted to give you an update. I know there's some questions out in the community about how that will work. I will plan to send that RFP out either at the end of this week or early next week. That process is a little bit different in that you as the board have a lot more flexibility in terms of which of the respondents you want to negotiate a lease with. We will hopefully get a few proposals. We're just tweaking the criteria right now. I think we talked about having a committee of 3 board members to evaluate those. And then you can choose to enter negotiations into one or several of them. Certainly it would be appropriate at that point to tour facilities, see what proposed build out is included in the proposal. And this is something that we haven't done here at the SU as long as anybody has been working here. So it's a bit of a new process. But again, you're required to bid it out, but unlike food service or construction, you're not required to take the low bidder because you're not necessarily getting every contractor to bid the exact same product the way you would be with a general contractor or a food service company. So does that distinction make sense to folks? Okay. And I think what I'll do is I'll arrange that so that the timing will work, that we potentially could bring a decision point to you at that May meeting.
And Morgan, can you remind me, I think we decided or talked about who would be on the committee at the last meeting.
I want to say it was you and Kevin and Polly.
Yeah, that's what I remembered, the 3 of us. Okay, great.
Kevin and Polly, is that how you remember it?
I wasn't there, so sure, that's how I remember it. And I saw Polly's eyebrows raised, so I'm not sure she remembered it that way.
I don't remember that either, but I'm fine doing that.
I did remember the conversation about Kevin not being there, though. I think we forgot the part of needing to tell you that, Kevin, after the meeting.
News to me, but it works.
Rick or Emily, do either of you remember being on that committee?
I do not.
Me neither.
There you go.
Okay.
But I
good.
also don't remember even having the conversation about it. So take that for what it's worth.
Okay, so unless there are any other questions, that's all I have on my agenda.
Great. Thanks, Morgan. So Lynn, you are up now.
Okay, so I spoke with both the ER board and the NMV board about the recovery process, the planning through what we're going to do as we shift our thinking into next year and what that's going to look like for us to start thinking about accelerating learning for our students next year. So we are in the midst of doing a needs assessment. So we're really unpacking data, and we're going to be using that data to design our strategies that we move forward. So by the time we meet again, I think Morgan is saying he's needing a mid-May meeting. We will have much more information to share with you. So I don't have a lot to add to that right now than what I shared with you at the local meetings. One thing I do have that I want to bring to you is, we have had conversations at this board level about our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion work as an organization. And you've taken a look at policy, you've adopted an equity policy as a board. You've committed to doing some professional learning, and we've talked through that idea of developing a multi-year plan for us to be focused and more equity literate within the organization. This has been a heavy lift, as you can probably imagine, doing this work. So we have an opportunity with the recovery money to hire a diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator to help to manage some of the load of doing this work. So my thinking is this would be a little bit more than a teacher contract level position, not full year, but maybe a 200-day contract. And it was something that we would work through negotiating at the central office and advertising for a position. So I just wanted to get a sense of if the board was in support of exploring that idea of hiring a DEI coordinator for the organization.
You talked about using COVID money for that. Would that be something, kind of like, what am I trying to say? Is it time sensitive, or are you thinking like getting the position in and then it would be part of the local budget?
I think that we'd have to evaluate that over time. I think there's a heavy lift right now, certainly. And I think that there could be work attached to that position as we move forward. I think when we think about the equity, what equity means, I think a lot of people think that equity has to do with, I think two of the common themes are race and issues around LGBTQIA. And I think that when we're talking about equity, we're talking about opportunities. We're talking about, ensuring that we are getting the, similar outcomes for our boys and our girls. And we're working to close the achievement gap for students who are living in poverty. We're working to close the achievement gap for students who have a learning disability and things like that. So I think that thinking through that lens of equity, it might be a longer term position, but I think we would need to reset and reorient after these first few years of doing the work. But the lift right now is really heavy, and I don't have anyone on staff that can fully take that on. I've been trying to do the best I can to help facilitate with our task force, but it's really more than I can lift on my own.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you were having somebody come in and just kind of build the system or the infrastructure, however you do that, and then kind of go off, or if it was going to be a consistent position. I was just wondering.
I think it could turn into a position that sticks around, but I'm not certain. I think that we'd have to take a look at that as we move forward.
So Lynn, can I chime in just for a quick second?
Yeah.
There's also a connection to the continuous improvement process and the snapshot. I know that we have talked before about the snapshot that the Agency of Education has, and as part of that, there is a equity designation, an equity support designation. This SU as a whole, and then also some of our schools are in the position of having equity support designation, which means that we have a gap, an achievement gap between historically marginalized populations and students who are not historically marginalized. And part of our task for the continuous improvement process, which now this year is being subsumed by the pandemic response planning. So they're kind of one and the same this year. But continuous improvement has been around as long as I can remember that process, a formal process through the Agency of Education and submitting a continuous improvement plan. And this type of equity work that, Lynn was talking about, really attending to access and achievement and also culture issues for all historically marginalized populations is a big part of that. So it is something that I think is going to need multi-year work and multi-year building of tools, and also, I think it is something that really could help bridge some of the silos and the gaps between special education and general education as well.
I'm very much in support of it. I think it would be a good use of the ESSER, some of those ESSER funds. I think it would be beneficial for the entire organization on so many levels. It's really timely and topical, and this work is really critically important. So I just wanted to throw my my 2 cents in that I support it. I think it's really important work, and I see already, Lynn, that there's not enough capacity to do this really important work. And so if that means bringing someone in who's really like tailored and targeted to this kind of specific role, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Is there any objection, or is the board?
I don't really have an objection. I'm a little nervous about adding more positions at this point in time, just a little bit. If it's COVID money, I think that's certainly a good place to put it. But what I would like to see actually is I would like to put some measurement values on this, right? If we're going to hire a person, I'd like to know where we are now, where we want to be and measurements that we can take along the way, so, and what those measurements are, I don't have any idea, but I need to start to be able to evaluate our impact on what we're trying to achieve with these positions.
Rick, you're right on in your thinking, and I certainly appreciate that. We've been consulting with Seed the Way, Dr. Rebecca Haslam this year. And when we first started doing the work, we're educators who tend to have that action-oriented mindset of, here's identifying, here's the work, here's the process, let's lay it out over a multi-year and kind of plan forward. And as we were doing that, she helped us to take a step back and say, maybe there are some steps that need to happen first in terms of evaluating the climate and the current condition within each of our buildings, and the culture within each of our buildings, and the data that we have. So the first part of the work would be doing that pre-assessment, Rick, in the fall. And then we would be using that data along the way. We talked about the equity policy that this board has adopted. And within that equity policy, I have an obligation to report back annually to this board on our progress. So the first crack at that would be at some point next fall, where we give you the pre-work. I would give you the analysis of what the work has been, what work we were able to accomplish this school year, and then a look at that climate and Jody, I'm probably not calling it the right thing.
There are a series of audits that we could engage in, and one of them is called the hidden curriculum, which is a really intriguing audit about what is present and what is missing in the curriculum. And then there's just a straight curriculum audit, which is taking a look at our curriculum resources. And also, yes, like you said, Lynn, there's a culture audit as well. So there are a series of audits that we can engage in to get that baseline data that Rick was alluding to, and then also a lot of disaggregation work that we can do with our achievement data as well. That would help to set a baseline and then to give us some measurements about that we could use to evaluate as we move forward.
And that's why, Mary, when you asked that, would this be something that we would want to roll into local budgeting? I think it would be, we would need to use that data to determine the impact of the work on our students. And I think that, you know, Rick's point is a great point, and it really does need to be driven based on the data and the outcomes for our students. Does that make sense, Rick?
Yep, perfect sense. No, I think it's fine. And I mean, we certainly can, it's like trying it for free, basically, for a year, right?
Right.
Yeah, and you know, we had talked about equity even when, you know, merging was on the table, or when we started merging, about equity even between buildings, between programs. So being able to kind of look at the whole picture, like you said, not just on a cultural equity, but in a opportunity equity. I mean, so all of those answers would behoove us to do that for sure.
Dr. Haslam really has pushed my thinking in that, through the lens of, I never really thought of digging into data in this way. So looking at, you know, we know the opportunities that we offer to our students within our system, but do we know which students are accessing those opportunities, and what data do we have that supports that those are accessible opportunities for all of our students? So she talked to us a little bit about that and doing that opportunity audit. The other thing she talked about is something that I wouldn't have thought of. She just asked the question of, how do people enter your building? And at first I thought that's kind of a strange question. I didn't really understand where she was going with it. And so I said, well, they push the button and then someone says something, and then you say who you are, and then they're buzzed into the building. And so she brought up the question of, do you consider, you know, your community welcoming for all of your families? So what happens if you're a community member who is deaf or hard of hearing, or if you're someone who's trying to enter the building but you don't speak English? What are the instructions written in? Like, is it accessible for all people? Do people know what the click means, right? Are you explicit on that? Just things like that. So it really does go deep in us looking at and analyzing the community as a whole to determine, you know, whether or not we are creating a safe and welcoming environment for all people. I apologize for the dog. She had a very long day in her kennel. She's behind me. So am I hearing that the board is in support of moving forward on that?
I think it makes sense.
So I have a couple of people who are joining us today. We have two different presentations. The first is Gab Lumbra, and I believe Gab's the principal of our Virtual Learning Academy, and she also is being joined by Maggie Cavazos. And I've asked them to talk through. We've had a lot of conversations about, you know, the virtual learning opportunity that we've had this year for the students in our K through 8, and how we've been able to design that internally. I still am not quite certain how we made that all work, but we were able to staff that up with the existing staff we had and created that opportunity this year without a lot of no training, no real time to design what that looks like. So we've been doing some visioning work and thinking about, now that we're in a situation where we have some time to think and we can think about what is ahead of us, is there an opportunity that we want to think through for the next school year for a virtual learning opportunity for both our K through 8 students and for our high school students? So I know that Gab's staff, the staff of the Virtual Learning Academy, has also been engaging in this. So I asked Gab to bring this to you as a board to see if there's interest in us continuing to explore this opportunity of a virtual learning academy. And the reason I'm bringing it to you at this special meeting is because of the timeline for hiring. So I did not want to wait until April, because there are teachers who currently work in the virtual learning academy, and if there are opportunities for this to continue, we'll need to know that, because they're going to be offered a contract before we meet again. So that's the context, and I'm going to turn it over to Gab and to Maggie.
I'm just gonna need presenting capabilities, and I think Maggie's just watching. I don't think she expected to speak, but maybe we'll ask her.
Oh boy, Maggie, I
She can
apologize.
certainly-
I bet you're sweating there.
She was texting me. She's like, "What?"
I thought Maggie was going to help you talk about 912.
She might. I mean, she might have some things to say, but
Well,
no
welcome.
pressure, Maggie.
No pressure.
All right. So yeah, so Lynn just asked me to think about the year, how the year has gone, and what we might do with it. So in thinking about this, we did do a survey just to see if there was interest, and it does seem like there is a subset of people who are interested in this work, or in this setup, this opportunity. And there are certain kids who are certainly thriving in this environment. So some of the things I took into consideration were the portrait of a graduate work from students. We did a lot of student and parent feedback over the year. And then just at the end of this, when Lynn asked me to sort of think back and reflect and see what we might design, I talked with the faculty about what has worked and what hasn't. And then just thinking about, like, if this wasn't COVID, what could virtual learning look like? So if we didn't have to be completely virtual, is there an opportunity here to sort of shift the systems and structures that we currently have? I took this quote from the portrait of a graduate work that students did, and I just thought it was sort of, I don't know, fitting in thinking about, how could we be thinking about moving forward with school, and how could school look different? So some of the things that parents and families have identified as being benefits of this virtual learning opportunity is just having more family time, having more time. These are families that are at home with their kids and enjoying that time. They have had the flexibility to do things during the day. A lot of kids are going up to the mountain skiing, or pursuing other hobbies, or doing family businesses. So it's really allowed them to have some flexibility during the day that they don't have when kids have to be in school. I think a lot of families experienced slowing down. It's not all day at school, soccer practice in the evening, a rushed dinner, and then bed. And then, so I think there was, some people enjoyed slowing down a little bit and being able to really enjoy those moments a little bit more. Ability to spend more time with just their personal interests. We have a lot of kids who are doing art, horseback riding, dance. They have all these other interests that they're now able to really spend more time on, and they can work at their own pace. So I think that's been beneficial for a lot of kids for a lot of different reasons, and a lot of different types of kids. Kids are maybe more self-directed, but also kids who can't sit still for a long time, or don't do well with a long day. They are able to take breaks more often. So it's worked for a variety of different types of learners and different types of families. We learned a lot very quickly about what worked and didn't work. So this year, the live meetings, kids are really enjoying those, especially I would say K-6. The live meetings have been really critical. They really look forward to them. They enjoy them. and they use them for both learning and for social needs. The classroom organizations worked. So K4, we had emoji classrooms, and then Google Classrooms for 5-8. We had some really great social events. This mid-year, we did like a big whole school event that went really well. Mid-year, I also implemented orientations for new students coming in and out, and that was really helpful, both 9, 12, and K8. So having that first initial contact was key. At the beginning of the year, it was all very rushed, and it was that was not very effective. Advisory and morning meetings. So advisory for 5-8 and morning meetings for K4 have worked really well. The kids like to get together and just check in. It's a good start to the day. It's a good routine. It doesn't allow them to sleep in and just sort of, mess around. They have that sort of, I'm up, I'm ready to go. They're checking in with an adult every day. So that's worked really well. At the beginning of the year, I really just encouraged people to focus on relationships and connection. And that really came from our initial shutdown. It seemed like the kids who had relationships with teachers were able to engage in remote learning, and the kids who didn't, it was really a struggle. So I really focused on encouraging teachers to just develop relationships and connection and not stress too much about the academics until that relationship had been formed. We have a couple paras supporting us. That's been really helpful. And then having Wednesdays be similar to the rest of the district, that's been really helpful also. So we have sort of a remote Wednesday where there's not any classes, but teachers can do intervention or meet with kids one-to-one, or we have unified arts options on that day too. Speaking of unified arts, that did not work very well. We have about 30 teachers who are trying to put together choice boards for K8, and it's been a little messy. There's not a lot of relationship, and our kids really, really like unified arts. So they're very physically active. They do a lot of artwork. We have a ton of talents that we discovered at our talent show in January. And so it didn't work very well, I think, mostly because of the relationship issue. 30 teachers is too many to be providing all those services. So that's something we'd want to look at. The flexible attendance policy also did not work very well. We're trying to meet the needs of parents and families who have different schedules, different childcare situations, but it was really, really tough to keep track of. And I think we lost a few kids in the process of having that flexibility. So we need to find some balance there. Special education also, we're talking about, I don't know, Michelle, if you want to chime in here, I think it's 30 special educators or something like that. All different grade levels, all different schools. So that sort of disconnect it was difficult for people to collaborate. VTVLC.
Yeah, one thing to just point out that I think both the unified arts and the special education, the problems that we faced were symptoms of us not having the ability to really plan forward and how we're going to provide the services.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
No additional staff members. That was the other tricky part, was to take the staff members that already existed within all of the buildings and spread some of those responsibilities around. So in a reactive mode, that was the best we could do. But if we move forward, it would be much more proactive and thoughtful.
Right. I'll certainly get there. And then high school through VTLC, it didn't work for very many kids. It serves the needs of a very small group of kids. And there are some kids who are doing okay and really enjoy the variety of courses that are offered through VTLC, but it's a very limited number. So it's not a good high school option in general. And as an entire high school experience. And then also providing materials was tricky for kids who were remote. So that's something we want to definitely look at. Books, getting books to them was very cumbersome. Getting math manipulatives was a process. So when Lynn asked me to think about this, I don't think right now we have 130 kids. I don't think we have 130 kids who would want to continue. But I do think there is a contingent of families who would benefit from this. And I know that we lost, correct me on the numbers, is it 50 or 60 homeschool? So we lost a bunch of kids to homeschool. That maybe, a cohort of people that might be interested in an alternative option. So I think we'd have to group the kids, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and then high school. That's my initial thinking. Certainly numbers would drive this thinking. And then I think it would be beneficial to pull what worked, those live meetings, advisory, the small group instruction that's happening is working really well. The one-to-one and small group interventions also going well. And then I think the things that need a little work are, and could potentially become a little bit more, less, I don't know how to say this, less, what's the word? Individualized. Like right now we have science and we have global citizenship separately, as well as UA separately. I think there needs to be a little more of an integrated approach with some of the other subjects for K2 and for 3-5, so that there's more project-based learning and more bigger things that kids are doing together where they can actually interact. They're really enjoying interacting, but they don't, with the siloed subjects, they're having a hard time doing that. So I think that's a place where we could build. 3-5 is really enjoying the clubs. They do some STEM clubs. They get together for lunch. They do Lego club. They're really having fun with that stuff. They're very social, these folks. The 3-5 group especially, they're very social. And then 6-8, I think that changes a little bit. Those kids are getting a little bit more independent. They want to get on meets less. They do a little more learning on their own. So I think that would be more of a sort of flipped model for some, and then maybe some mixed group integrated projects for the other things. Yeah. And then for high school, VTVLC did not work for most kids. Most kids ended up going back to hybrid. It's a very modular program. It's really about work completion, and it's really content based. So kids who enjoyed the content and wanted to learn something new and were pretty, I don't even know if I'd say motivated learners, but skilled at figuring things out and self-directed, did okay with VTVLC classes, or they did okay with some training. So if they met with me for like a week before they started the class, they did okay. The rest of the kids, not so much. But we have been working for several years on, a more proficiency-based high school graduation model. And we have a flexible pathway at Enosburg that I think we could scale, and I think meets the needs of a lot of students that we have at the high school level who are working. They have things they're doing outside of school besides work that are either hobbies or they're just running their own businesses. I mean, we have students at the high school level who are doing all sorts of things, and then the 8 to 3 schedule kind of gets in the way of those things. And I think there is a subset of people who could benefit from a more flexible schedule. So based on the portrait of a graduate work, I think we could create, and we already have an equivalent set of credits that kids are graduating with. So Maggie and I have been working with the Flexible Pathways Academy kids. I think you might need to chime in here. I think we have 10 who are doing an alternative path of graduation. So they're not graduating with credits, they're graduating with proficiencies. They have an equivalent set of proficiencies they're graduating with. We've identified some weaknesses here too. I think, you know, when they do this, they can, as you can see, once they create their plan, they can get their high school credits through internships, through work, through projects, or in person or online courses. So there's a variety of ways that they can get these credits. I think we would need to bolster up the current advisory system for this right now. So I think they would need a person attached to them. I think they need weekly meetings. I think they need meetings with guidance to make sure they're sort of on track and doing what they need to do. And then they need content advising after they did like an orientation. So I think we'd have to bolster this program up a little bit, but Maggie and I have worked on it this year. And I think we have a good plan in place for being able to scale it. And I think we could scale it for Richford as well. Oops. Ooh, and I can't get back. So the way that we would manage, should I stop talking and let people ask questions, or should I just talk through the whole thing? And then
I personally think you're doing great. I think you're answering some of the questions along the way. Do any board members want her to pause here?
No, you're doing great.
Okay. If you have questions, like write them down and I'm happy to answer. So the way we've been managing the Flexible Pathways program at Enosburg is through the mastery transcript. So this is a gradeless transcript. It showcases student evidence of learning. It's based on a set of equivalent proficiencies, which is part of our policy. And it tracks progress towards meeting these proficiencies, and it shows the courses as well. So this is kind of an example of what it looks like, showing the proficiencies. And then this is, it shows the courses that kids have taken, but it doesn't show any grades. So it's not attached to grades at all. We have been working with these guys for about 5 years. We had one graduate last spring, and we have five graduating this year. We haven't had anybody go to college yet with this transcript, but there have been 85 acceptances. And all EFHS freshmen currently have these transcripts accessible to them, and most of them have put evidence in there this year. So we're continuing to work with these folks, and there's about 300 other schools who are on board with them. But we were one of the first. We've been working with them a long time.
Gab, can I chime in really quickly to say that there are about 300 high schools, and then there are maybe close to that number of colleges who also have reviewed and given feedback. So it's a two-way street.
Yep. They have a person who's in charge, who's like their job is just to work with colleges and admissions officers on this. So Winooski is using this, they used this transcript last year for all their students. So all their students graduated with mastery transcripts. And then there's a few other schools that are also have piloted it this last year, as did we just didn't have anybody go off to college with it. So 19, 20, 85 offers for admission using this transcript. And then that's just some of the colleges I've listed there who have accepted students with this transcript.
CVU, and also I believe Peoples and some other folks are also getting on board with this in Vermont.
They're on board, they're just not using it yet, but yes, they're members, they are member schools. Winooski is the only one in Vermont that I know of that's actually used it. So all their kids have it, and it was their main transcript last year. So overall, some things I think we need to change are just the attendance policies. We need to figure that out. We need to figure out how to keep track of kids and make sure that they're engaging and that it's working for them. Live meetings have been really effective, and we have some data on, how that's been impactful. So I think we have to think about expectations for live meetings and setting some those up for families and students before they come in. I think we probably need a couple interventionists. We really need a math person to like focus on students who need to improve their math skills, as well as literacy. So we have a literacy specialist right now, but we don't have a math. We could use either a special educator or a plan for one contact person for special education. That was really problematic, but I think that, you know, if we had a single person, even if whatever that looked like, I think that would be okay. I'd love to see some student leadership in this work. Kids are interested, but there's no venue for them to do that. So I'd like to build that up. I think we need to do something about the high school prerequisite skills, which Maggie and I have been working on, some like modules that kids would work through in order to demonstrate preparation or be prepared to do the kind of project-based learning that is required and have the skills that they need to be successful with it. So there's a gap there, but I think we have a plan. We really need that orientation is key. Like the lack of communication at the beginning of the year was really tough and we were really scrambling. So I think if we could organize that, we'd be in really good shape. The kids love the event in January, and I think we should do more of that stuff. And I think it could be incorporated with some of the project-based learning experiences or the more integrated, the integrated experiences. And families are interested in connecting with each other. It was a little tough to get that going, but I think there is a little bit of an interest, and we had quite a bit of people, quite a bit of parent involvement in the. We had an event in January where we had parent workshops, and there was a lot of showing for parent involvement. So I think they're interested in talking about their kids. They're interested in talking to other parents. They're interested in talking about education, but they probably need some opportunities to do that. I'd like to see something with homeschool coordination. I don't know if it would need to be that much if we put some other things in place, but I think there are certain situations where it would be really helpful to have a person who could go to the home and connect with families and provide some service there. And that seems like a need around the district. So I'm not sure if maybe it might play into that. I mean, generating ideas about staffing is hard without knowing the numbers, but I think we could do this with teams of 2 teachers for K-5, and then maybe some combination of 2 or 2.5 teachers for 6-8. It's a little tricky with the certifications. I definitely need an admin assistant, and I think that we should really think about marketing, because I think that we could market, especially the high school option, to other sending schools outside of our district. You know, it could become an option for other people that are further away. I think we need at least 2 full-time interventionists, ELA and a math. I think somebody needs to head this up. I'm not quite sure how to deal with the unified arts, but I guess what I think is that there needs to be fewer people and more relationship building, however we do it, whether it's within the district or we hire somebody who is multifaceted in their certifications. I don't think we need a lot of people, but the certifications get in the way. So I'll leave that to Lynn to sort of play around with. At the high school level, we need probably 4 high school advisors to start, and we already have those. We have time in the day for those advisors already at Enosburg. So I think it's a matter of building on what we have. We may have to add a little bit more time in the day. And if we decide to get Richford in there, they may need somebody, but they may not need it. I mean, it's virtual. So the actual place doesn't really matter. I think we can get creative with that. but they need time in their day for sure, because they're reviewing evidence and they're working with kids on developing projects. And then we need some solution for special education. I think the to-do list is pretty big. I think, if we were going to build another school option, we'd need, some work on mission and vision. We need to get the curriculum and assessment plan aligned with the rest of the district, and also figure out how it's virtual, because that was a little bit problematic. We couldn't really take the current curriculum and assessment plan and just plop it into a virtual environment. There were some barriers there, so we need to figure that out. I'd really like to have parents and kids involved in designing. I think they have a lot of opinions about what worked and what didn't work, and so I'd like to have some sort of structure for that to happen, and then a plan for family orientation, setting some expectations so that we don't have just people flip-flopping from remote to in-person learning. I really, again, I'm just going to reiterate, we need, I'm not a marketer, and I have a little bit of experience trying to market. We need somebody who can sell this to families if we're going to do it, I think. Create some good materials and be able to get them out there. And then because of the shift to both remote and also a more integrated thinking about curriculum, maybe project-based learning or experiential learning, I think we're going to have some teacher training and PD needs. So, I'd like to see at least a week of collaborative prep. If we have teachers that are existing, I think they'd have a benefit because they are already in it. But they need some real time to collaborate and figure out what they're going to do. But I think they could come up with something good. If we hired from outside, I think that we might need a little more time. Again, I'd like to get parents and students involved. I'd like to figure out, when the orientation is going to be, enrollment dates, those kinds of decisions need to get made so that we could sell it before the next year. We need to figure out supplies and maybe technology. I feel like we just sort of made do this year, but there are probably some technology things that we need, and we need to ensure that kids have supplies, and that's sort of an equity issue that I'm not sure how to deal with. Again, the curriculum and assessment, we need to just make sure it's streamlined, and then the marketing again. I just don't want to let that go, because I think that it could be really valuable to have somebody, or at least a plan about how we're going to market this so we can get enough people to make it worth it, and that we could potentially sell it to people outside this district, especially at the high school level. And that's that. Whew, I don't usually talk that long.
Very thorough, Gab. One of the things I should have said when Gab started is part of this conversation came about as a result of the number of students that we lost to homeschooling this year. And I think that the board is very aware of the impact of a loss of equalized pupil and what that has on your tax rates, because of the direct impact that has. I think that the thinking was, will those homeschool students return if we return in the fall to full in person? And will the students who are in the virtual learning academy now return in the fall to fully in person? Or would we have the ability to return more of them and maintain a higher level of equalized pupil if we were able to design some sort of a remote learning opportunity? The same holds true for the high school option. If we could create this flexible pathway, this is something that it wouldn't matter where you lived. If this was something that we could really do a nice job of creating a really enriching opportunity for students to expand upon their interests and really demonstrate their proficiencies in a unique way, that this might be something that students from far away in other parts of the state would be, could actually be a part of. It wouldn't matter where they live. So that's where the crux of this thinking came from. So the whole point is to give you this overview tonight and just get a sense from the board whether or not there's interest in us continuing to explore this potential opportunity.
I know you probably can't answer this because you don't really know numbers, but the staffing needs, would that be pulled from potential existing staffing, or was that all like a school within a school new staffing?
Why did Lynn go away? Like, why did you go away when she asked that question,
Yeah,
Lynn?
I saw that.
My light was off and it looked like I was sitting in a closet, so I shut off my camera. I think it's a combination of the two, Polly. There are some resources that we already have that are available to us, and at the same time, we did make a promise to the staff that we pulled into the Virtual Learning Academy this year that they'd have ability to go back to their existing positions. There are some who have talked to Gab about how they would really like to continue on in a virtual learning or in a virtual assignment moving forward. So the reality is it might be a combination of the two. I think that the K-8 part, it will depend on the number of students who would be returning to in-person and the number of students who'd be going to the Virtual Learning Academy. So I think Gab's thinking is based on if I had X number of students, but that number wouldn't be predetermined until we had a better sense of how many kids would be interested in this.
I think the trickiest part is the 6-8, because the certification, requires subject area certification, basically. So that's the trickiest part.
And the current system of your flexible pathways in the high school, could a student, like if there were no changes and there was no virtual academy, could they still create this option through the flexible pathway? Does that make sense? The question I'm asking?
Pretty much, Polly. Any student can access it. I feel like, I don't know if Maggie wants to chime in at this point. I'm not sure how well we are marketing it. And scaling it would be a little bit different. Like if we were to be like, okay, but yes, everybody basically has the option.
Yeah, the access is there. Like Gab said, the marketing piece, just making sure that everyone is aware, is a little bit of a challenge, especially given COVID this year. But it is feasible for sure. The support might look a little different. I think if we had the Virtual Learning Academy in place, the framework would be a little bit stronger for students who wanted to be fully out of the building than it might be if they were simply in flexible pathways through the school.
Do you guys think that you could incorporate some other things into this model maybe? So I'm still thinking of like Cold Hollow Career Center, where students really have to decide of kind of what path they want to take. So if, for instance, nursing, if they take the nursing thing, then they miss some of the science stuff that's offered at the high school for scheduling purposes. Do you think that we could coordinate this through the Virtual Learning Academy somehow? You know what I'm saying? So for instance, so physiology or whatever may be offered at the high school at a certain time, but if they want to take the nursing program at the Cold Hollow Career Center, it's also offered at the same time. So they have to make a decision on which one they want to do. Whereas I could envision this as maybe doing something different under the guides of the Virtual Learning Academy. Or for instance, somebody wants to take a science that's offered at Richford and it's not offered at Enosburg or vice versa? Could that be done through the virtual learning academy, or is it too different?
That can be done outside of the virtual learning academy.
Yeah,
We've
I was
been
going to say
working,
either of those things could probably be done outside of the virtual learning academy.
right. We've been working to align schedules so that there is that flexibility. And now that, you know, there are some good things that have come out of COVID. And one of them is that our ability to think differently about your presence in a class, right? We've demonstrated that kids can be successful in a virtual learning option. So that idea of equity of opportunity, as we've been trying to work through as a group since the merge, it expands that opportunity if we don't have to focus on, do they have to physically drive that number of miles down the road in order to be able to participate? Or is there another way that we can give them a really similar experience from their home base, whether it's in Enosburg or whether it is in Richford? So the answer is yes, Rick, to both. And I think that your example about the physiology class, there are ways that you could do that now through dual enrollment courses at CCV. And Maggie and Gab talked about, or I guess it was Gab that talked about, the equivalents. So if there were equivalent proficiencies identified for that physiology course, a student could still access that, but do it through a flexible pathway so that they're demonstrating their learning in a different way. I don't know if Maggie or Gab wants to expand on that.
I mean, I think the Flexible Pathways Academy option, or the equivalent option, allows for all of those things to happen. It allows you to take classes that might be required for your career path. It allows you to develop projects that might relate to something that you're doing because you run a business or because you're at Cold Hollow. It's about creating evidence. So students who are at Cold Hollow might create evidence based on their work there and present it as, ELA equivalent evidence or science evidence, but they also might take, a class that's important for their career development. So it allows for multiple pathways. What goes away, I think the big difference is the credits go away. So you don't need 3 math, 3 science, 3, it's not that system anymore. It's a proficiency system. So I think that's the biggest difference.
I mean, I'm all for thinking about, education flexibly, and, like you said, it might capture some of those families that want the homeschool option. My only caveat would just really to make sure that we're not duplicating systems we already have, I guess is what I'm thinking. Like, for instance, you're talking about the flexible pathways at the high school and that we have this option. So then maybe it's a K-8 academy and then you enter the flexible pathways in the high school. But I also heard Maggie loud and clear that, there might be some more tightening up if you had this virtual academy. I guess I would just ask that we kind of look through it, look under a microscope and just see if there's duplication or what. But, I'm all for thinking about education in a flexible way for sure.
I'm absolutely in favor of kind of exploring it further. I feel like it would be helpful to get a sense of the anticipated enrollment, and even getting surveys out to some of our existing homeschool families and see if they might be interested in kind of then, coming into the districts rather than, they're on their own homeschooling. So that would be helpful to put out a survey. And then certainly the kind of economics of it need to be explored. I'm mindful of, if we're drawing on, kind of the families and the students in this, across this SU, but creating a whole another budget. I just want to try to understand a little bit more of the kind of the impact fiscally. That would be helpful to know, when we circle back to this. But I think there's tremendous value. I mean, and we've shown this kind of incredible kind of ingenuity, I think, in crafting and creating. I mean, you all have shown it from the beginning, and it seems as though it answers some needs that we haven't until this year been able to kind of answer for some of our families and kids, especially around that kind of flexibility and such. So, I am also knowing that, when we needed to hire a math interventionist at Montgomery, we really wrangled with the kind of budgetary impact of that. And that was just one math interventionist. And so a lot of these conversations have to be budget kind of driven. And so those numbers would be really helpful to fully understand what does that look like if we continue having the virtual academy. And I had one question. Can you just clarify, because this year the virtual academy was for our K through 8, but what now you're kind of envisioning is a full K through 12, because really the VTLC just was not wildly successful for our high schoolers. Am I understanding that?
Yeah, well, VTVLC was the virtual option for 9-12.
Right, but this would be all of our virtual learners K through 12 in-house under the umbrella of our virtual academy run through the SU.
Yeah, and they would
Great.
have the opportunity to take VTVLC courses, but just like everybody else has the opportunity to take VTVLC courses, but they wouldn't have to do their entire high school career that way.
And just curious, things like, would there be a way, the way that we share staffing throughout the SU, would there be a way to kind of economize in some capacities of drawing on our existing college counseling that we have in the high schools already, or some of those advisor roles? I mean, if people have the capacity that are in-house in our physical schools, could they straddle between working in the buildings and working with some of our virtual kids as well, as opposed to needing to have all these kind of like duplication of roles on the staffing side of things?
Do you want to go, Lynn?
So I think that was part of the visioning, is that there are already some staffing structures in place within those buildings. I think when we're hearing Gab and Maggie say scale up, I think it's assessing, do we have the right level of staffing structure? They're not saying let's hire all of these new positions for that, but we could use another part-time, position to cover this part, or a little bit of an increase in FTE for this part. But we would be looking at it through the lens of, if we increase there, is there a way? Do we need to backfill that in the physical space as well? So I think that, what you're asking for makes sense, is to look at it through the lens of the potential impact. And I know this is kind of crystal ball thinking, right? Of the interest we would have and what impact that might have on our equalized pupil. And then looking at, if we had that number of individuals, although we wouldn't be able to get an exact spending plan, I think I'm hearing you ask for kind of an approximation, or what level of increase would we be talking about in some of those positions. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that would be really helpful for sure.
And
so if we kind of circled back in April with some of those surveys for enrollment and some of these kind of cost projections, I think it would clarify it. But I'm certainly in favor of, tasking you all to explore this as a pilot, moving forward.
I would also love to make a connection between this idea and what we've been tasked with the pandemic response planning in terms of re-engagement and engagement with school, with students. That's one of the 3 pillars that we need to look at. And so, you know, the flexible thinking piece around how we can move forward from this pandemic and take the things that worked and continue and expand upon them. And then also, you know, thinking about working with families who maybe have some concerns about being in school still because of the pandemic. So I just wanted to make a connection there with that whole piece that we're engaging in right now with the pandemic response planning.
And Mary, we did do an initial survey. So we've got about, we got 70 responses. So that's about half. We did include the homeschool families that we had access to their information. We included those people. So some of these are homeschool families. There's about 72% that are interested, 73% that are said, you know, if there was a virtual K-8 option, I'd be interested. So we don't have one-to-one, but you know, we have a percentage, and 70 responses is a lot.
Yeah.
You know, 50% on a survey. Having done quite a few surveys, 50% is a lot.
I think our families might be a little surveyed out right now.
So any other questions or comments from other board folks? Or, you know, maybe we will leave it, Lynn, that we're going, you know, that we're interested in exploring what this would look like. It would be helpful for the next meeting to have kind of anticipated enrollment data through, you know, whatever more surveys you want to send out, and some sense of kind of cost.
Okay. That makes sense.
Great. So Lynn, I want to just interrupt you. I know we're not through your section of the agenda, but I'm aware that we had a few visitors join. And my guess, and my apologies to our visitors, my guess is that they didn't have the correct start time. I'm assuming, but regardless, I wanted to kind of circle back and do that visitor text, just acknowledge them and see who would like to speak.
Sure, and at one point we had 5. We've got right now Dan Rico and Crystal Godbout, who I am guessing are here as part of Michelle's presentation later.
Yes.
Okay, so we don't have to take them.
Okay.
Linda Collins, who we expected, and Deborah Steenhauer was on, but she seems to have dropped off. And then we have a visitor who I think I know who it is. Her name is Nancy on the Zoom. And Nancy, if you would just unmute and let us know who you are, and if you're looking to speak to the board.
Hi, I'm Nancy West,
Okay.
and I came on. I did not have the correct start time because I was looking to see what I was interested into talking about was on the agenda, and it said 6:50. So I jumped on thinking, okay, I'm right on time. And apparently I missed it.
Perfect. So I think, Mary, what we can do is that you can go to Linda and then go to Nancy, and then I will let you know if Deborah hops back on.
Okay, great. All right, so Linda, you want to introduce yourself and let us know what you'd like to discuss?
For those of you that don't know me, can you hear me? Am I on? Okay,
Yeah.
I also don't know the start time. I just guessed it and I was wrong. I'm the chair of the Richford Select Board, and I taught in Enosburg 12th grade English for over 30 years. So this is not a rivalry process. I love both towns. I love all the people in them. There's people on these cameras that I had as students. I'm here because after the article in the Courier or the Messenger, I can't remember which one, telling about your possibility of moving into the Pearly Block in Enosburg, my phone rang off the wall. People asked me to give Richford's side of it or whatever. I don't know what you want to call it. But as you know, the supervisory union has been in Richford since the beginning of time. And I know all the issues. I know the parking issue. I know the handicap issue. And we have been, the town of Richford apparently purchased the post office building years ago to keep the post office in town. So we are the landlord. And we have tried over the years to accommodate the supervisory union by giving you the ground floor because we didn't have an elevator, several other things. We have a lease with you for about $25,000 a year. That includes heat, lights, insurance, garbage, custodial, everything. I know the drawbacks. I know the no parking. We put in a new parking lot across from the bridge. It's basically empty, a municipal parking lot that certainly could be used. I was at Notch Friday and saw the parking lot behind the Pearly Block, which was pretty full. And I just wondered how, with 3 things in that building, there would be any more parking. I know gone are the days that Forest Farnham and Dura Herchabees ran the whole district by themselves. You have many employees now that don't want to go the extra route to Richford. However, here's the important part that the people of Richford have been expressing. We support the supervisory union with our taxes. And by the supervisory union renting the post office, Richford gets a little bit back from that. And when you were possibly going into the armory, Enosburg will have gotten some of that money back. This building, I assume it's privately owned, and nothing would come back to the towns. And when we merged, people in Richford felt, by the way, merged against our wills. People in Richford felt that soon it was going to be all Enosburg and it was slowly going to suck away from Richford. And the phone calls I've been getting are expressing that same concern that this, is another nail in the coffin here. And I know this has been planned for many years because I personally think I stopped it 1 year from going into the high school at Enosburg, which was the plan at one point. It was several years ago. And I know your superintendent and some of your members have been to Montpelier when it was time to acquire the armory and said that the supervisory union would probably be there. So I know this is a fruitless effort, but I am here to just let you know that Richford people are sad about this. I won't say upset. And that's my purpose. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Otherwise, I'll leave you to your duties. And I don't know, I've heard something about a bidding process, but I heard it on the street. I haven't heard it from you, from any of you. So I don't know if that's a possibility. I don't know how we could bid any lower than we charge now. I'm done.
Linda, thank you. And I'm sorry again about the confusion around the start time. And I appreciate you coming and sharing your concerns, and I know you speak on behalf of a lot of members of your community.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly have a ways to go in this kind of conversation and the decision making, and it's very important for us to hear from people in all the communities. So, and we will absolutely kind of take into consideration what you've shared, and you can reach out at any time. And we're always happy to keep people in the loop. Our meetings are public. You can join us for every meeting where we're discussing this. No decisions have been made yet. And Morgan can specifically, he knows a little more the kind of nuances of the bidding process, and he could maybe share that a little just to kind of help. So we're all kind of understanding the language around the bidding.
Well, I'm hoping when the bid comes about that we get some kind of a notification. I do want to point out how huge the building is. I'm not spatially that clear on things, but you have the entire upstairs, you have an office on the ground floor, and you have all the storage you need in the basement, which is dry, and somebody could live down there. It has a shower and it has a bathroom. I mean, it's a huge building. I just can't imagine you'd have that much space anywhere else, but you probably know more than I do about that. So,
Linda, we did go over the bid process earlier in the meeting, and I will follow up with you tonight on an email.
thank you. Thank you. Sorry I was late. I really had no idea what time the meeting started.
No, no problem at all. It's totally fine.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening. Unless you have any other questions for me, I'll leave the meeting.
Thanks again, Linda. And we'll certainly, we have a lot of discussion to continue doing. And like I said, please feel welcome at any of the future meetings so you can keep in the loop as this unfolds.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, and so Morgan, remind me, I'm sorry, I wrote down, we had Linda, and then who else is the other visitor? I can't see everyone on my screen.
It's Nancy West.
Okay. Nancy, would you like to introduce yourself and let the board know what you're here to discuss?
Hi, I'm Nancy West. I live in Sheldon. I came to the school board meeting because on the agenda under number 6, they were going to discuss, and you probably already have because I'm late because of the agenda notice, the food services and management contract. I'm really interested in seeing what options are out there for us. I've had to complain about the meals and stuff at our school. I've had other parents share their concerns, and I know that the contract, I do believe, is up for bids. So I just wanted to know, are we looking for other options than the one that's there now? Are we looking to staff it ourselves? Is that an option? Or how does this process work? I'm really interested in switching the food services for numerous reasons. I mean, we've received rotten food the kids can't eat, sour milk. I could go on. I took pictures and sent them to share them with other people. I shared my concerns, and I was told there was nothing they could do. Their hands were tied. And I felt that wasn't a good response. It makes our school look bad. It makes our community look bad when families are receiving this type of food when the children really need it. So that's why I'm here today.
And Nancy, similar to my answer to Linda, we did go over the bid process a little earlier in the meeting, and I will reach out to you directly by email and walk you through that as well.
All right. Thank you so much. I just wanted to express my concerns, and I'll be looking for your email and then see what else we can do.
Thank you, Nancy. And apologies again about the mix up on the start time. And I'm pleased you could come and join us and share your concerns. And we're certainly, we hear them. And Morgan will be back in touch as the bidding process unfolds, and we can keep you in the loop, and feel welcome to join us for next month's meeting because we will have some more details by that point.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And thank you for letting me speak, even if I'm late. So thank you very much.
You're so welcome, Nancy. Take care.
Yep. Bye-bye.
And Mary, you potentially have one other person, someone logged on with the name of Sharon and with no last name. Sharon, are you here to address the board? Nope, I got a message that she's not. So you can go back to Lynn at this point.
Okay, great. So Lynn, I think you were on, I think we kind of came to good closure, yes, on the virtual learning and what we're kind of tasking you all with between now and April. So you're now on your bullet D.
Okay. So we have, and tonight is a little heavy with presentations, and I apologize because I know it, when you start getting a little later into the meeting, it feels a little heavy. I think that we're in a place where we're having to move forward and think about our next steps in a really timely way. That's why you're getting them all right now, because we're getting into hiring season. So I know that one of the goals we've had in terms of special education, as you all know, the special education service has been centralized. That was required in statute. So we run the special ed services through our office. And one of the goals we've had for several years is for us to build the capacity within our system so that we're not as reliant on outside agencies to provide more costly services to the students that we serve. So Michelle Taberge and her team have been working really hard to develop systems of support for students who need more intensive services and support. So she's here today to talk with you about a concept for a new specialized program at the elementary level. And I do know she has some people here to help.
Brought my gang.
Okay, so I'm turning it over to you.
All right. So I can share, right?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. So we wanted to share an idea that we have around an alternative program for students at the elementary level. So I talked with the board last year around the alternative program that is housed at Richford Junior Senior High School that we call TAPS, which is the Transitioning into Adult Programs and Services. So we want to create some similar programming where we can be very intentional in our planning for students that have a similar profile but are at the elementary level. So just to highlight the learner that I am talking about, on an IEP, we would state that this student is inside the regular classroom under 40% of the time. So what is this? It's an alternative program for students in our supervisory union, but it's really just, it's a space. And this space is not in place of a regular ed classroom, but an additional program that's designed to meet unique needs. So the primary purpose is to acquire academic, self-care, communication, and social skills in an environment that is to their special needs. So, for example, we have IEP goals, and we might have a student who is using a device to communicate. And I want a program that we can provide opportunities for this student to work on saying hello and then joining a morning meeting where they can be successful in their regular ed classroom. So it's getting more intentional for these unique needs, more individualized. So I'm going to let Kelly speak on a little bit because this isn't really new. It's just we're wanting to build on an existing program that we started at Richford Elementary School in 2019, and we're looking to expand it to all students in FNESU that might fit this profile. So Kelly, if you want to speak a little bit about what you've already started.
Sure. So last year when I started at Richford, we have, as in many schools, we have a select population of students who have some significant needs that are difficult to meet within the classroom. So Krista Gladbout, a behavior specialist that works for the supervisory union, was then and still is doing some work in our school at Richford. And she and I really started to target some programming for some of these students. And we developed a mission statement and a vision for what it would look like to be able to very intentionally meet the needs of some of our children who are not being able to have those needs met when they are in the classroom 100% of the time. So I was able to find a space in my building, very much like pulling children out for special ed services or for speech services. We created opportunities for some students to be able to be pulled out for some very intentional work with a special educator and some trained behavior technicians, with Crystal herself and with a special educator that we had attached
to this program for part of the time. And the idea was that we would have these children be able to come out, much like Michelle just said, be able to come out of the classroom, do some very, very targeted work around whether it's communication, social skills, and then be able to bring that into the classroom. So for example, you know, we can have a child learn to sit very quietly in class during morning meeting when we're doing a circle and trying to greet each other, but that's not what we're aiming for. We want children to be able to interact socially and appropriately and very interactively with their peers. So being able to take them out for some very, very targeted instruction, just as we would with, as I said, with special ed or with special ed services or with speech services. So we were able to finally, by January, start to really put the pieces in place. Felt like we were kind of getting things up and going, and then March happened and we all went remote. So we started again this fall, kind of picked up where we left off, except that COVID, of course, made this program look difficult. Very difficult, very, very different. We still had a select population of students that we were trying really hard to target in terms of being able to provide some very intensive, intentional services for. And I think that we've been pretty successful with being able to do that. However,
can I just jump in real quick? So when Kelly talks about like programming, like specific programming, there's, hopefully I can, why is it not letting me go to the next slide? Oh, wait a minute. Okay. So when we're talking about specific programming, there's like discrete trials that we would use with students that are, you know, teaching them individual skills in a very systematic, discrete way, and then using another technique called natural environment teaching. So there's specific programming that we would like to be able to, I guess, increase the intensity of for the students that we're talking about right now. Sorry, Kelly.
Nope, that's good. And so we have behavior technicians that are also attached to both the program. Right now, they're more attached to the individual students because, as I said, COVID has really helped to shape the program in a way that we would not necessarily want it to shape next year or at any point in the future. So hopefully, obviously, you know, moving forward, we're not going to have the same restrictions that we've had this year. So the behavior technicians have really been more attached to the child as opposed to the program. But still the intent of the program is there. And we have been able to still do some really intentional targeted work with individual students. So being able to pull them out of the classroom, very small population, just a handful of children, being able to pull them out of the classroom, do some really intensive teaching, either with the behavior technician or the special educator, or a combination of both for certain parts of the day, and then being able to move the children back into the classroom to be able to really use those skills.
We also want, yep, and we also want to be able to utilize our community resources more. We want to have an opportunity for students to work with the high school kids in the TAPS program. The older kids started like a dog treat business and they're doing some farm to table, and we want to offer them some project-based experiences. So really looking at their IEP goals and expanding and meeting their needs. And a lot of the population we're talking about get overstimulated very easily, and they need a different space in order to learn. And so that we just want to be able to create that opportunity for them. And I'm going to jump ahead a couple slides because Kelly started talking about staffing, and I just really want to highlight this part. So when we were thinking about the staffing that was needed to be able to make this program successful, we need one special educator. And part of the problem that it really hasn't been as successful as we want it to now is because we haven't had one special educator tied to this program. They've worked with this population of kids, but then they also had to take on a few other grades. And so they haven't been able to be as intentional. So special educator tied to this program, but it's not a rehire. I don't need to hire anybody. I'm just going to shift people. And then we already have a behavior analyst, which is Crystal, that's been working with this program. And then Kelly mentioned that right now we have behavior technicians, which come with training, and then Crystal supervises these people. And right now we probably have 10 behavior technicians tied one-to-one with students. And so we feel that when we develop this program, we're going to be able to eliminate the need for all of these one-to-ones. And we're thinking we could start with 4 to 5 behavior technicians. We already have an SLP, so we're just going to shift the SLP, speech language pathologist, to this program. So everybody else was talking tonight about adding maybe some more staffing, but I'm actually saying that we're going to reduce some staffing here. So I think obviously that's great news. Then I don't know if I really need to get into this, and I certainly will if people would like to hear about it, but I just finished by talking about what the roles of each individual in the program would be. I'm not sure how much people want me to talk. So I don't.
Michelle, I think the only thing that I would add is I think our immediate goal for the upcoming fall is I think we've really looked at our needs at both Richford and Enosburg Elementary, and hence the reason that Kelly, the Richford principal, and John Hubbard, the Enosburg principal, are also on this meeting. I think we've sort of brainstormed that we have a population of approximately 8 to 12 students that this would be a program that could very much meet their needs, as Michelle has discussed. So I think it's really right now we're looking at the Enosburg Richford, but I think we'd like to think beyond that eventually, and how might students from the NMV side, is there a possibility to maybe tuition them in to access this program if there are those population of students in other elementary schools, and there certainly are. But I just wanted to highlight, and Michelle, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that the immediate fall 2021 was really looking at the Enosburg Richford, kind of combining to that Richford location, where we would have opportunities to collaborate with the high school and maybe kind of get some of that mentoring in place. Again, a long-term goal, but definitely something that we know would be beneficial for all of the students.
Yep, agreed. And I happen to have somebody who is very interested in being the special educator for this program. And after a little bit of convincing, I think I have him agreed to come and join this program. So Dan Rico is interested in being the special educator, and he's here in case anyone had any questions for him.
And again, the only thing that I'll add before anyone asks questions is that Dan has led the work at Enosburg Elementary for the last several years. So he definitely has experience and has seen success, and has also kind of overcome some obstacles of what previous barriers were, and having to problem solve and change things along the way. So I think, we really felt like he would be a great asset based on the experience that he's had at the elementary level. And, he's done some professional development to enhance his learning around a lot of that, and has also collaborated extensively with numerous service providers, from physical therapists, occupational therapists, behavior analysts,
working with devices.
So he's got that experience that he can now generalize that with a population of students. And I think that's going to be very beneficial for the students and their families.
And I'll just add that Crystal is a big asset to this group. She has tremendous skills working with students with autism and developmental delays, and creates fantastic programming. And she and Dan work really well together. So I think this is such a great opportunity for students in our supervisory union.
What was your guys' input from parents?
We presented it to you first.
But you've been doing this a little bit at the elementary school, right?
We've been doing this in both of the schools, and I'm looking to combine it and expand on it, provide more opportunities.
So for what you've done so far, what was the parental response?
Dan and Crystal, do you want to answer that one?
So, I mean, if you're talking about this possible extension of the program, we haven't discussed that at all with parents. But as far as my experience with working with the families that I work with the students that I work with, I mean, I have good communication, good relationships with all my family. So they've been really receptive to the system that I have going here with Crystal. So like Michelle's kind of said, it's not really reinventing the wheel. It's just sort of consolidating services so that we can, it's a little bit more efficient to kind of have more of the students in one place. That way we can kind of dedicate more resources to having some of the infrastructure we need, but also giving us opportunities to sort of create groupings with these students that need that specialized learning, and we can have more opportunities to do community outreach sort of with them, or just general group activities, social learning with them as well within the school, because we have a bigger population. So it's just to kind of consolidate services.
Yep, sorry, Dan. And we also have struggled, and I'm hoping it's COVID related, but we've really struggled to find behavior technicians to work with some of our students. And so this is trying to alleviate that staffing issue that I continuously have in creating a program so that we can offer high level services without the need of all of these one-to-ones.
Right. And also too, as you can imagine, working with these students is different than working with typical students and their needs. So it'll also help me to be able to dedicate my attention and my focus on working with just these kids, and it'll allow me to, you know, venture down some paths or do professional development differently, and think of new or work with new systems that'll help all of them, instead of having to work with some of those kids and then I have to go teach regular math curriculum to fifth graders, and also, which can be difficult because it's, you know, kind of all over the place. I have meetings about so many different things constantly. So it'd be nice to, or it's more efficient to have me focused on that one area. That way I can put my energy into specializing in this.
I could just add,
sorry.
Go ahead, Crystal.
Okay, sorry, my internet's really bad, so hopefully I don't cut anybody off. Just to piggyback off of what Dan said, and like the saving staff kind of thing too, I think from my perspective, trying to be across two schools, if we're in one place, that's going to give them more access to me and more specialized services. And the same, you know, it's hard to hire 7 people that are specialized in one thing. So I think having us all in one place and really giving them the access to that is going to be important, and save on staffing, and also just provide more services than what the kids are getting.
And make it more effective, I think, this way.
Dan and Crystal have worked really hard with building relationships with the families of the students, and knowing that we have identified Richford as the location, given the fact that we have a program at the middle and high school at Richford. We're hoping that the relationship piece will really help with the number of students. And we're talking about less than 6 here. Hopefully that relationship piece will help ease the transition for students to access a program that's really sort of meant to work towards their needs.
I'd just like to add a couple of things, or address a couple of things. Certainly one of the challenges we've had this year across the board has been with staffing. People have had to be out, whether it's teachers or paraeducators or, you know, whomever, for various reasons, but certainly COVID has presented staffing challenges this year. Some of our children have very significant needs and have very highly trained people that are with them. When one of those people is out, it does create a significant hole there for how we're meeting the needs of that child on a given day. Often a special educator may have to get pulled from services because the special educator will have to be with that child that day. So one of my hopes is that we're going to build some capacity to be able to support our students if one person is missing. It's never good to be in a position where any program or anything is really dependent on a person. So one of my hopes is that we're going to be building some capacity to be able to support our students as people sort of have to move in and out. And then to the question of how do parents respond, when we started this program last year at Richford, we were really intentional about how we were talking to parents. And as with anything, there's always a little bit of skepticism, like, what are you proposing? People have responded really, really, really well. Like, they've been very enthusiastic about, I want what's best for my kid. And if this is going to provide an opportunity for my child to get some very targeted instruction, I'm fine with that, because my child might be pulled anyway for special education services, or they might be pulled for speech services. So if this is going to provide them with an opportunity to get some more targeted instruction to be able to then bring back into the classroom, then I'm on board with that. And so we have not had any parent that has said, absolutely not, I don't want my child to receive the services that, additional services or targeted services outside of the classroom.
Just one piece.
And then how is transportation going to be provided?
Michelle, do you want to take that?
So I'm working on that still. I'm trying really hard to potentially lease a van. We have a variety of options. There's buses that go back and forth between Enosburg and Richford. Could have a behavior technician or, different staffing on the bus with students to ride. I could get a van. We could pay, I think we're talking, like Robin said, less than 5 kids. So we could potentially pay for families to transport their child and drop them off at Richford if needed, depending on their comfort level. So I have some ideas, just haven't figured out all of the details yet.
The bottom line is just to highlight for the board that transportation would be a related service in the IEP, so it would be something that the school was responsible for. But we also recognize that some families may not want to put their child on a bus or a van or a cab or all the other variety of options we have. So part of that responsibility would be if families were able to, we would certainly reimburse them mileage. But I think our hope is to create a transportation system, like Michelle said, with potentially leasing a van, where we could also utilize that for some community-based and project-based learning that may take place off the public school grounds. So certainly something that we want to spend more time looking into. And ultimately, I think our long-term goal with this is we really want to eliminate the need for some of these students to need out of district placement to really meet those alternative needs. So with that being said, we have to be creative about what the opportunities are that we're offering and be able to explore options like this.
Really, I'm sorry.
I just want to say this, Robin was a perfect segue for me. I've been trying to interject this one piece. When I was a principal years ago, there were not a lot of programs that we had the ability to run ourselves in terms of our staff and the training that they had and the support that we had embedded within our system. So a lot of times when students came into the system and they had this level of need, we would rely on Northwest Counseling and Support Services in their school-based autism program. And we would hire a behavior interventionist through them to work one-on-one with students. Beyond that, we had SOAR Back to School also was an out-of-district option for students who had this level of intensive needs. So this kind of creative thinking and building the capacity within our system, this is exactly what we've been talking about in terms of really creating that space and that opportunity to do really high quality programming for our students in order to prevent the need for us to be able to have to access that higher level of support through Northwest Counseling and ultimately through SOAR Learning Center. So
But actually, Lynn, the LEAPS program at Sora, which is designed for the students that we're talking about, is, what is it, Robin? Like almost twice as much as just their regular SOAR slot. So
That dates me. It's not back to school anymore.
It's called LEAPS.
Is it appropriate for me to chime in?
Yeah.
So a couple of things. I'm noticing some common themes, and throughout this whole meeting, and one of them has been about equity and about kind of flexible pathway. And so I just see this as another flexible pathway that's providing equity to kids, which we were talking about with the virtual learning. So it's almost the same thread, I feel like. It's just a different population of kids. That's kind of how I see it. And then speaking with my kind of BFA hat, we have the SIP program here, which is community integration. And it kind of has become a little bit of a magnet for this school because it is such a well-functioning program. And I could see where that could potentially be this, right? Where you have this functioning system that people are really attracted to because they could possibly see some good outcomes. And it's going to save us money because we're not placing kids out in a different system. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. And we need less people in it than we currently already have. So
I just want to add one final thing, just to follow up with Polly and Polly, I do appreciate your comments and sort of tying some of all of this together. One of the things that we also want to do is keep our kids in our communities. You know, sometimes it is really hard to get our kids back after we have sent them somewhere else, whether it's another school, another virtual learning school, or a different high school, or another alternative program. And, you know, we really want to keep our kids in our community. And I feel like that's the other common theme that I've heard this evening, is really trying to keep our kids in our schools.
And I have a quick question, and this is an excellent presentation. I really appreciate it, and I so value all the work that you all do. It's really just enormously impactful work, and so important. So thank you for that. And I'm just curious, I heard, Michelle, I think you mentioned the possibility that if we have kids on the NMV side of things, that we would possibly be able to also tuition them in. So am I understanding correctly that you would have theoretically the capacity? And I don't know the numbers. I'm sure you do, of how many kids in NMV might be good candidates for this type of arrangement. And if that's a possibility, like when would that be kind of a reality or something that we could actualize for our NMV kids?
So we have to really look at the details and figure out how many students we're actually talking about. When I originally was thinking about this program, we're thinking 10 to 12, like at the max. And I honestly don't think there's more than that in our supervisory union. I have to really go back and sit down and look at, like, start putting names of who we would think would match this this program. I don't know if Crystal, you have a better idea of that since you work SU-wide with this population of students, but I'm thinking 10 to 12. And I think it comes down to the transportation, how I'm going to get students here. I think that's the trickiest piece of this.
Mary, the only thing that I feel I can add is I really think we need the 2021-2022 school year to really perfect this, I guess. And I'm going to say that kind of chuckling, because I think there's always going to be room for improving and growing with this program. And once we can work through the barriers that we're going to have thrown at us, I think we can certainly potentially expand this down the road. And if I know Michelle has a vision of, 10 to 12 students, and I think that that's a great start. But the reality is, if we have more students, I think we have to adapt to that. And that might mean increasing the staffing in the program, but also being intentional. Because like Kelly said, like, we're trying to work with what the research shows us. We know we want to keep kids in the community. We know that the research is out there about the amount of support students often have from adults and how it creates dependency and doesn't allow them to be independent. So we're trying to be mindful in all that and really work on the things that Michelle identified early on in her presentation. But I think in an ideal world, hopefully the following year, we could figure out how do we look at our other schools and figure out how we can, if students sort of meet the criteria for that program, how can we invite them to have access to this program to meet hopefully the needs that are in their plans as well.
Great, thank you so much, Robin. Great.
I would just throw in there sort of the two threads that are going on. If Michelle and her team are able to successfully figure out the programmatic pieces of this, transportation will be a challenge, but it'll be a challenge that we'll figure out, and the district boundaries will be less of a challenge, and we'll figure that out.
I'm getting my van. Just kidding.
In your driveway, just turn around.
I was leaving the van ask into most of the conversations.
Okay, anything else, any further questions from board folks for this panel? Okay, and Lynn, did you then have anything under your other?
So I have two things. They're not super long. I sent you an email right before the meeting. One was an attachment to that email, and that was a position statement that was sent out earlier today from the Vermont Superintendents Association regarding the proposed pension reform measures that are currently at the legislation level. So I just wanted you to take a moment to read that. And one of the things I think it's important to note is that the pension system is in kind of dire needs at this point, through no fault of the employees, of the education employees. So there's a deficit in that fund, and they're trying to make up that deficit in the fund. The proposal that is there now relies heavily on the educators to make up the deficit in the fund, asking them to pay more, to work longer, to change the rules of how their final retirement is calculated, and to be in a place where their cost of living that people were expecting at retirement is either not there at all, or it's much less. So it is the workforce is a little demoralized right now as a result of this proposal. So I just wanted to give the board this heads up. I think that where the proposal stands right now, there is if people are within 5 years of retiring, they would be protected from the outcomes that are proposed. The reality is, I'm anticipating that if this goes through as written, the work that we've been doing to attract and retain high quality teachers and leaders is going to be impacted significantly, not just from the condition of the pension in Vermont, but also if people are at that retirement age, there's some incentive to retire at your earliest possible opportunity if you're within that 5-year window. So I would expect that if this really does happen, we're going to have an even more significant workforce shortage in 5 years. So I just wanted to put that in front of you. I know some of you, consider these things and consider your own advocacy as a result of some of the legislation that is proposed. So I would ask you to do with it as you wish, but I wanted to make sure you were aware of what's happening out there. The last thing I have on my agenda, I'll share my screen just briefly. I sent you the 21-22 draft FNESU calendar. So can everyone see what's on my screen? that a yes? I can only see like 3
Yeah.
yes. Okay, perfect. So this calendar is relatively similar to calendars that we have developed in the past. I'm going to outline for you some differences. The formatting of it is a little different than what we've used in the past, and Polly will recognize this because I actually, I won't say stole, but I borrowed the formatting of Maple Run because I really liked it, and her superintendent's a very good sharer. So we have this running column on the right-hand side of each month that tells us the number of student days within each month, and then the number of teacher days within each month. So it helps us to track out, you know, in track of all of the professional learning days compared to student days. So the proposed first day of school would be the last Wednesday in August. That is pretty consistent. What you're seeing here is a typical August for us in terms of in-service. There will be some slight changes at the local level because the building principals will be able to flex these green days a little bit in the local school calendars. September is the same that you're used to seeing. In this calendar for October, we typically take a long weekend here, like the 15th and 18th. And we would do an in-service on one of the days and we would have it be a day off on the other. For this calendar, we have an in-service plan for the 8th and then Indigenous Peoples Day off on the 11th. We have done something a little different with parent-teacher conferences as well within this calendar. So this would be parent-teacher conference week, for example. Friday would be a day off if people did their parent-teacher conferences in the evening of that week. This would be a day off from school. If not, they would be working on Friday. So teachers would work the equivalent of 5 days, whether they get that extra day in the evening or if they just work on the Friday. This has us having student days the first 2 days of the Thanksgiving break. Why is November highlighted? Oh, classes resume. Sorry. Okay, so last year you approved us having 2 early release days. We have not done that this year because of COVID, so we've just used the Wednesday time. This calendar puts in 3 early release days. These are in red. So the first early release date would be in December. This reflects the winter break starting on the 23rd. This would be a slight change in January. We typically do not have school on MLK Day. We would follow that up with an in-service day the next day, and then an early release date in February. The February break is the same. This is a parent-teacher conference week. I'm sorry, no, it isn't. It is an SU in-service day. And then this April 15th would be a parent-teacher conference week. So similar to what we talked about in November, this would be a day off if people did evening conferences. An early release date in May. And then the last day of school proposed would be June 9th with one additional local in-service day to be determined in the calendar. So what this does for us is it gives us the opportunity to see our teachers for professional learning on a pretty regular basis throughout the year. So we would have the ability to have our teachers for professional learning at the SU level in August and in October, and then we would have them again in December for some data work. And we would also have an in-service in January, more data work in February, and in May, we would see them in March. So there's not so much time in between when we can provide those professional learning opportunities as there had been in historical calendars. So it's not crazy different than the calendar we proposed to you last year with the exception of one additional early release date. Does anyone have any questions about the 21-22 proposed calendar? If there are no questions or comments on the calendar, Mary, I would be looking for a motion to approve the calendar.
Okay, great. Someone like to make that motion?
I'll move.
By roll, Rick,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
Polly,
Aye.
and I believe Emily needed to tend to a sick child and bowed out.
It has dropped off.
Okay, and Mary is an aye.
So Mary, that is all I have under my agenda. And I just want to add, there are no central office updates scheduled for this meeting. So I unless there's something specific any of you wanted these leaders to address,
Oh,
I
okay.
asked them not to plan on reporting this month. They
Oh,
will
okay.
report for you in April.
Okay, great. Well, that means we're really not running that late at this point. So great. Okay. So if there's nothing for central office, do any board members have any specific questions for central office staff? So then we are really on to our board business. Anyone have any particular future agenda items? No, we had a few things kind of threads that ran through that'll be to be continued from the bulk of the meeting. Sorry, my puppy just dive bombed me there. Go ahead. Oh, the cord. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, puppies.
Every Zoom meeting should have puppies.
He's a handful, this one. All right. So anything under other that folks wanted to discuss? All right. Well, so then I think that all I need is a motion to adjourn.
I'll
I'll make that motion.
Oh, sorry, I beat you to it, Kevin.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Everyone give a thumbs up for that motion. Stay
Aye.
well. Take care.
Night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.